This video is about Israel's wars of defense and the power of resilience. Subscribe for more. In the dimly lit command center of the Israeli Defense Forces in Tel Aviv, a palpable tension filled the air. The year was 1948, and the echoes of gunfire from the front lines reverberated through the walls, mingling with the anxious murmurs of officers gathered around a large map that sprawled across the table. They traced their fingers across the borders of a nascent nation, newly declared but already under siege. Amid the swarm of military strategists stood David Ben-Gurion, the determined leader of this fledgling state, a man whose voice would forge the identity of a nation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange hue across the city, Ben-Gurion's eyes narrowed in focus. The War of Independence had erupted just days after Israel's declaration, igniting a fierce battle against neighboring Arab states bent on its destruction. Every strategic decision made in this room had life and death consequences. What lay ahead was not just a fight for territory, but a struggle for survival, a test of resolve that would define the very essence of the Israeli spirit. Among the officers was Yossi, a young lieutenant whose heart raced with both fear and adrenaline. He had grown up hearing tales of heroism and sacrifice, but now, the stories were his reality. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a rifle, the weight of history pressing down upon him. This was not merely a conflict over land, it was a clash of ideologies, a battle for existence against the shadow of genocide that had darkened his people just a few years earlier in Europe. Across the Atlantic, in the corridors of the Pentagon, General Dwight D. Eisenhower received urgent reports of the unfolding chaos. The USA, emerging from the ashes of World War II as a superpower, was both a beacon of hope and a source of trepidation for a new state of Israel. Eisenhower, who had orchestrated the Allied victory in Europe against the Axis powers, understood the stakes involved. He knew that supporting Israel would not only protect a vital ally, but also send a powerful message to nations across Europe still grappling with their past. In Berlin, General Hans Schmidt, a veteran of the Nazi regime, watched with a mix of envy and regret as the young state of Israel fought for its life. His hands, once stained with the blood of innocence, now trembled with the desire for redemption. The scars of World War II still haunted him, and he longed to find a way to atone for the horrors he had witnessed. He had seen how the ideologies of hate had torn Europe apart, and a relentless cycle of violence threatened to renew itself in the Middle East. Back in Tel Aviv, the map on the table became the center of urgent discussions. Each red mark indicated a location where battles had raged, where lives had been lost, and where dreams had been shattered. Ben-Gurion's voice rose above the clamor as he spoke of resilience, urging his men to push forward despite the overwhelming odds. "We fight not just for borders, but for our right to exist," he declared, his words igniting a fire within the hearts of those gathered. Yossi's stomach churned as he recalled the stories of the Holocaust, the memories of his grandparents' harrowing escape from Europe. The knowledge of suffering spurred him on, fueling his desire to protect this fragile new nation. As he looked around at his comrades, he saw the same determination reflected in their eyes. They were all fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting to honor the past and build a future. As night fell, the sounds of gunfire grew louder. The initial skirmishes had escalated into full-scale battles, and the Israeli forces faced an array of enemies: Jordanian, Egyptian, and Syrian troops, all converging on their borders. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, and the lights of distant explosions illuminated the dark sky, each flash a reminder of the chaos that reigned outside. Under the cover of night, Yossi and his platoon moved to the front lines, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and adrenaline. They were young, many still in their teens, but they carried the weight of their people's history on their shoulders. As they took their positions, Yossi felt an inexplicable connection to the land beneath his feet. It was a part of him, a part of his identity, and he was determined to defend it at all costs. The first encounter came swiftly. They ambushed an approaching convoy, the sound of gunfire echoing against the hills. Yossi's training kicked in as he took aim and fired, feeling the jolt of the rifle in his hands. He saw his comrades moving in unison, a dance of courage and urgency. Each shot fired was a declaration of existence, each fallen enemy a testament to the desperate struggle for survival. The clash was brutal, chaos enveloping them as the battle raged. Yossi ducked behind the boulder, his heart racing as he caught glimpses of enemy soldiers advancing. He recalled the words of Ben-Gurion, resonating in his mind. "We will fight, and we will win." The fervor of those words surged through him as he emerged from his covert, charging forward alongside his fellow fighters who had become brothers in arms. As dawn broke, the battlefield was transformed, littered with debris and the remnants of conflict. Yossi crouched low, surveying the aftermath. The victory had come at a profound cost, but a sense of unity persisted among the soldiers. They had stood together in the face of adversity, their resilience shining bright against the backdrop of despair. Meanwhile, in America, Eisenhower faced mounting pressure from both political allies and foes. The situation in Israel was deteriorating, and the international community watched with bated breath. Would the United States intervene, or would it allow this new nation to fall into the abyss? He understood the ramifications of inaction, the potential fallout that could ripple across Europe and beyond. A decision loomed, one that could alter the course of history. Back in Tel Aviv, Ben-Gurion convened an emergency meeting with his top generals. The urgency of the situation was palpable, the tide of war was unpredictable, and allies could sway the outcome. The message from the United States was awaited intently, a lifeline that could bolster their defenses. Would the Americans come to their aid, or would they stand back in silence? As the sun rose higher, illuminating the battlefield in a harsh light, Yossi felt the weight of uncertainty. He had fought valiantly, but the war was far from over. The struggles of Israel were intertwined with the larger narrative of Europe's complex history, echoing the resilience of a people determined to rise from the ashes of despair. The days turned into weeks, and the fighting continued with relentless ferocity. The initial victories were overshadowed by losses, and the reality of war settled heavily on Yossi's shoulders. Each day, he faced the specter of death, knowing that every decision made in the command center echoed on the front lines. He often thought of the lessons of history, the cautionary tales of nations torn apart by conflict and hatred. As the sounds of battle faded into the distance one fateful night, Yossi found himself staring up at the stars, contemplating the stark reality of their situation. Beneath the dark sky, he dared to dream of peace, of a future where the scars of war would heal. The determination of a young nation and the resilience of its people surged within him, igniting a flame of hope. But the stark truth remained: the war was far from over, and the shadows of history loomed large. Alliances would be tested, and the specter of past conflicts would threaten to resurface. The stakes were high, and the fate of Israel hung in the balance as the world watched closely. In this battle for existence, what sacrifices would be made? What choices would define their future? As the echoes of the past danced in the air, Yossi steeled himself for the challenges ahead, unaware of the pivotal role he would play in a conflict that would reverberate across generations. The next chapter awaited, fraught with danger and revelations that could shift the tide of war. Would the support of the United States arrive in time to turn the tide for Israel, or would darkness close in once more? The answers lay ahead, as the struggle for survival continued, a testament to the enduring spirit of resilience that burned brightly within the heart of a nation on the brink. In the weeks that followed, the conflict escalated into a relentless storm. Each day brought new battles, new losses, and new stories of heroism among the ranks of the Israeli Defense Forces. Yossi, now hardened by war, found himself entrenched in a cycle of combat that tested his limits, both physically and emotionally. His nights were filled with visions of home, the laughter of friends, and the warmth of family fading into the chaos of gunfire and explosions. The fear of losing those moments fueled his determination to fight on, to carve a future for the nation rising from the embers of despair. In the command center of the IDF, Ben-Gurion's strategic brilliance was on full display. Every decision he made was a delicate balancing act, weighing the necessity of military actions against the potential for international ramifications. As he studied the shifting lines on the map, the colors marking enemy movements, he felt the weight of an entire nation resting on his shoulders. The reports from the front lines echoed the urgency of the situation. Victories were fleeting, and supplies were dwindling. The call for reinforcements echoed in the corridors of power. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the political landscape in the United States was shifting. Eisenhower faced an increasing chorus of voices urging him to act. The Jewish community in America rallied for support, highlighting the historical connection to the plight of the Jewish people. The ghosts of the Holocaust loomed large, with activists demanding that the EU step in and provide military assistance. Eisenhower understood the stakes. This was not simply a battle for territory, it was a fight against the shadows of history that threatened to repeat themselves. But he was acutely aware that any intervention would provoke backlash from Arab nations, potentially destabilizing the fragile balance in the Middle East. Back in Tel Aviv, Yossi's courage was tested as the IDF launched a pivotal operation to secure a key area near Jerusalem. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces were amassing for an all-out assault. As Yossi and his unit prepared for the combat ahead, the air crackled with tension. He looked across at his fellow soldiers, the faces painted with determination, but he could also see the weariness etched into their expressions. There was an unspoken bond among them, a recognition of shared sacrifice that transcended their individual fears. As they moved towards their objective, the terrain became a familiar enemy, craggy hills and rocky outcrops that offered little cover. The plan was to flank the advancing enemy troops, striking before they could launch their anticipated offensive. Yossi felt the adrenaline surge as they approached the designated point, hearts racing in unison. But the moment of action never came without cost. As they approached, a burst of gunfire shattered the calm, and the ambush was sprung. Yossi ducked behind a boulder, the world around him exploding into chaos as bullets whizzed past. The air thickened with tension and the metallic scent of blood, but he pressed forward, rallying the troops around him. Each command echoed with desperation. Hold the line. He could see his comrades falling, the price of survival etched in pain on their faces. The battle raged on, a furious storm of violence. Yossi fought like a man possessed, driven by the memories of those who had come before him and the dreams of what could be. He charged into the fray, his rifle steady in his grip as he fired on enemy targets, each shot a testament to resilience. The cries of his fellow soldiers fueled him, the bravery ignited a fire within him that blazed against the encroaching darkness. Hours later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the scarred battlefield, the Israeli forces began to push back. The enemy line faltered, and Yossi could feel the tide turning. It was a moment of victory, but it was bittersweet. The cost had been high, with too many lives lost to celebrate fully. They had secured the area, but at what price? As Yossi surveyed the aftermath, the weight of reality settled heavily on his chest. The sight of fallen comrades brought forth a flood of grief that threatened to consume him. Yet there was a flicker of hope. They had held their ground, a testament to the spirit of a nation forged in battle. In the aftermath, Ben-Gurion addressed the nation, his voice resonating through the airwaves. We are a people who have faced adversity, and we will not falter. Our struggles will not be in vain. His words rippled through the Israeli community, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the despair. The resilience of the nation was undeniable, but the fight was far from over. In the corridors of power in Washington, as Eisenhower watched the reports flood in, he knew the moment for action had arrived. The tide of public sentiment was turning, the American people were rallying behind Israel. He convened his top advisors, weighing options of logistical support against the prospect of strategic alliances with Arab nations. The stakes were rising, and the clock was ticking. He understood the shadow of history looming over him. Failure to act could lead to catastrophic consequences. The echoes of World War II haunted his decisions, reminding him of the cost of inaction. As the weeks turned into a mosaic of blood and sacrifice, he also learned to navigate the terrain of war. Each day brought new challenges, but also a growing camaraderie with his fellow soldiers. They shared stories around flickering campfires, the laughter and camaraderie a balm against the cruel reality of war. Yossi found solace in these moments, a reminder that they were fighting for a future worth living. Yet the specter of uncertainty loomed. Reports of Arab coalition forces rallying from neighboring countries sent ripples of apprehension through the ranks. The unity that had initially buoyed their spirits began to falter as rumors swirled with the year. Support truly on the way, or was it merely a flicker of hope destined to be extinguished? Thus he often found himself gazing out over the landscape, the sun setting against the backdrop of conflict, wondering if this fight was meant to be their final stand. In the heart of Europe, General Schmidt watched the events unfold with a heavy heart. The remnants of his past clung to him like shadows, and he grappled with the consequences of his former life. He longed to do something, to fight against the tide of hatred he had once been a part of. The stories of suffering echoed within him, and he felt compelled to act. There was a sense of urgency in his every breath where he found redemption in aiding a nation fighting for its survival. As the winds of war continued to howl, Yossi steeled himself for what lay ahead. With each day that passed, the stakes rose higher, and the battle for Israel became a clash of destinies. What sacrifices would he and his comrades endure? Would Eisenhower's decision to intervene shift the course of history? And would the legacy of resilience continue to thrive amidst the chaos? The answers loomed on the horizon, shrouded in uncertainty like a storm waiting to break. The struggle for survival persisted, a dance with fate itself, as the world held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The landscape of war shifted dramatically as the summer of 1948 progressed, and a palpable sense of urgency infused the air in Tel Aviv. Yossi's once youthful exuberance was replaced by a hardened resolve. He was no longer just fighting for his nation, but for the very essence of his people. With skirmishes intensifying, every day brought fresh devastation and loss, as well as moments of valor that would be etched into the annals of history. In a command center, the tension was palpable. Ben-Gurion stood before a large map that had become their lifeline, tracing routes for reinforcements and strategizing next steps. The tone was somber, the urgency of the situation had escalated to a breaking point. The attacks from Arab forces were vicious, and the fledgling state was hanging by a thread. Ben-Gurion's voice cut through the whispers of anxiety, resolute and unwavering. "We are not just fighting for territory, we are fighting for our identity, our future." Amidst the turmoil, reports began filtering in from Washington. Eisenhower, faced with growing pressure from the American Jewish community and allies, knew that the time for action was at hand. There were echoes of the past in his mind, images of liberation, of standing against tyranny during World War II. The memories of the Holocaust loomed large, urging him to take a decisive stance. The words of his advisors reverberated through the war room, each one reminding him that the world was watching and that history would judge him. As Yossi crouched in the trenches, shrapnel whistling past his ears, he found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The toll of the conflict was evident, the faces of fallen friends haunted him, shadows of lives cut short. Yet he could also feel the spirit of his ancestors propelling him forward, igniting an inner fire that refused to flicker out. The fight was relentless, but so was his desire to protect the fragile nation he now called home. One fateful evening, an urgent call summoned Yossi and his unit to a critical operation aimed at securing a strategic position near the outskirts of Jerusalem. The intelligence suggested a large enemy force was moving to encircle the city, threatening to snuff out the flickering light of hope within the populace. Ben-Gurion had made the decision: this operation could either bolster their defenses or mark a catastrophic defeat. As they approached the target area under the cloak of night, Yossi felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The silhouettes of his comrades moved stealthily alongside him, their breath mingling with the dust of the earth. The tension tightened around them like a noose. They inched forward, hearts pounding in unison, knowing that with each step, they were threading a needle between life and death. At that moment, the air exploded with sound, a gunfire erupted from the shadows, and chaos enveloped them. Yossi dove for cover behind a crumbling wall, adrenaline surging through his veins. He could hear the shouts of his comrades, the clash of metal, and the cries of the wounded. This was more than a battle, it was a testament to their will to survive, a reflection of the resilience that had defined their struggle from the very beginning. "Push forward," Yossi shouted, rallying his unit. His voice cut through the din, igniting a surge of courage as they regrouped, weaving through the chaos. They charged ahead, rifles raised, driven by the hope of a nation resting on their shoulders. The firefight escalated, transforming the night into a cacophony of violence. Bullets flew as they engaged with enemy forces, a desperate dance on the razor's edge of survival. Yossi's heart raced as he fought beside his brothers, their lives intertwined in this moment of shared destiny. Each shot fired was a prayer for peace, each enemy combatant taken down a step closer to securing their future. Hours passed, yet the battle raged on. Just as it seemed they might gain the upper hand, a group of enemy reinforcements flanked them from the east. The tide threatened to turn against them, and the young soldiers found themselves caught in a vice. The realization hit hard: this could be the moment that defined the struggle, the tipping point of a nascent nation teetering on the edge. With courage born from desperation, Yossi called for a tactical retreat to regroup and reassess. "Fall back to the ridge," he barked, guiding his fellow soldiers. "We need to regroup and draw them out." The plan was risky, but they had to adapt if they were to survive. As they pulled back, they could hear the enemy closing in, the sounds of their shouts reverberating through the valley. The Israeli soldiers found temporary refuge behind a line of boulders, their breaths heavy with exhaustion and fear. Their fellow soldier named Davi shouted, fire in his eyes. The question hung in the air, and Yossi felt the rallying spirit of his comrades surge again. They were not merely fighting for land, they were fighting for their very existence. Under the cover of darkness, they devised a new strategy. Yossi positioned his squad to cover the flanks while others prepared for a counter-offensive. The enemy, emboldened by their initial success, advanced without caution. They would learn quickly how wrong they were to underestimate the resolve of the Israeli defense forces. As dawn broke, the landscape transformed into a battlefield stained with the realities of war. Yossi felt the stone of fate in the air. With a fierce shout, he and his comrades charged forward into the fray once more, battling to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The tide shifted as they engaged with grit and tenacity, but the costs were high. They were fighting not just for territory, but for the future of their people, their children, and the memory of those lost in the Holocaust. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Eisenhower's decision loomed over him like a storm cloud. The reports of casualties and the cries for support reached a crescendo. He joined his advisors, each voice urging a different course of action. The pressure mounted. Would he act now to send aid to Israel, risking backlash from Arab nations, or would he wait and gamble on the survival of a young nation? In the final moments of the battle, just as the Israeli forces began to push the enemy back, the sound of aircraft engines roared overhead. The sky was filled with American planes, a sight that ignited hope among the beleaguered soldiers below. The unexpected arrival of support from the United States turned the tide in that critical moment. Air support. Yossi shouted, his heart leaping. The planes swooped down, releasing a barrage of fire that engulfed the enemy positions. The heavens themselves seemed to align with their struggle, and Yossi felt a surge of renewed energy. The coordinated assault from above was a lifeline, a testament to the international bonds forming in the shadow of conflict. As the enemy faltered, Yossi as unit capitalized on the moment, charging forward once more. The battle that had raged for hours began to crumble, and with it the enemy's resolve. The key position was secure, but the victory was bittersweet, marked by the echoes of loss and sacrifice. As dust settled over the battlefield, Yossi stood amid the remnants of the fight, a myriad of emotions washing over him: relief, grief, and a flicker of hope. The battle for Jerusalem had ended, but the war was far from over. The realization hit hard. They had won a crucial battle, but the fight for survival had only just begun. Unbeknownst to Yossi, General Schmidt was grappling with his own internal turmoil in Berlin. The memories of the past weighed heavily on him, and the desire to atone for his past haunted him still. News of Israel's plight had reached him, igniting a fire in his soul. Would he have the courage to act and join the fight against the shadows of his former life? As the sun dipped below the horizon, Yossi felt an unsettling calm settle over the battlefield. The resilience of their spirit had shone through, but the shadows of history loomed ever closer. Would the support from the United States continue? And what sacrifices would be required to ensure Israel's survival in the days to come? The whispers of the past beckoned as the struggle for existence raged on, leaving the future hanging in the delicate balance of fate. The echoes of war reverberated through Europe, and in the hearts of those battling for Israel, the question lingered: how far would they go to guard against the darkness, and who among them would emerge as a beacon of hope in the relentless storm of conflict? As the dust settled over the battlefield, Yossi surveyed the remnants of the fierce clash for Jerusalem. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, mingling with the metallic tan of blood that clung to the earth like an unshakable memory. The victory, while hard won, was underscored by the heavy silence that followed. The cries of the wounded and the fallen echoed in his mind, intertwining with the realization that this was merely one battle in a long and grueling war. The Israeli soldiers, weary yet unbroken, began to regroup. Among them was Avi, his steadfast comrade who had fought by Yossi's side throughout the turbulent days. "We did it, Yossi," Avi said, his voice hoarse but laced with a hint of triumph. The weight of their recent victory felt almost surreal, a fleeting moment of reprieve amidst the chaos. Yossi nodded, though his heart was heavy with the memory of their fallen brothers. The cost of this triumph loomed large. Too many lives had been sacrificed to secure a mere foothold. Their commander, a grizzled veteran named Colonel Katz, gathered the troops, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. He called, commanding the attention of every soldier. "Today, we have shown what we are made of. We held our ground against overwhelming odds." A chorus of cheers erupted, but Yossi felt a sense of unease. They had prevailed, but he knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. "However, we must remain vigilant. This victory is but a chapter in our story. We must prepare for what lies ahead." In the coming days, the Israeli Defense Forces began to consolidate their positions, aiming to fortify defenses while trying to decipher the next moves of their adversaries. Yossi spent hours on the lookout, scanning the horizon for signs of enemy movements, the weight of anticipation pressing down on him. Each storm brought renewed anxiety, as the scars of war never fully faded. They merely shifted, resurfacing in dreams during restless nights. Across the ocean, in Washington, Eisenhower's resolve to support Israel only grew stronger. The recent victories had sparked a renewed sense of urgency, prompting him to dispatch aid in the form of military supplies and logistical support. His advisors urged caution, warning of potential repercussions from Arab nations, but the stakes were too high for him to ignore. The shadows of the past, the Holocaust, the horrors of genocide returned to haunt him. He understood that the world was watching, and the moment called for a decisive act of solidarity. In the corridors of power, Eisenhower spoke passionately about the need for a vision of peace and stability in the region, urging his advisors to focus on a strategy that would not only support Israel but also foster long-term relationships with the Arab nations. This is about preventing another catastrophe, one that we have seen before, he declared, recalling the lessons of World War II. The echoes of history weighed heavily upon him, reminding him of the price of inaction. Back in Israel, the situation remained tense. The IDF was stretched thin, and the soldiers were acutely aware of the growing threat of a coordinated offensive by the Arab coalition. The intelligence reports revealed that rival forces were regrouping, preparing for another attempt to extinguish the flickering flame of Israel's existence. Yossi's resolve, however, was unwavering. The spirit of his ancestors, the memories of those lost, fueled his determination to fight for their survival. As the summer wore on, tensions escalated further. The war transitioned from battles for specific territories to a broader conflict of attrition. Each side suffered losses, and Yossi felt the emotional toll weighing heavily on him as the faces of friends and comrades blurred into a haunting parade of memories. Yet, amidst the despair, glimmers of hope emerged. The Israeli people rallied together, uniting in unwavering support for their armed forces. The collective spirit of resilience overshadowed the individual sorrows, binding them together in their fight for existence. One warm afternoon, Yossi found himself at the command center, listening intently as Ben-Gurion strategized with his top generals. The atmosphere was electric with tension as they discussed the latest developments. "We must strike decisively," Ben-Gurion asserted, his voice firm. "The enemy is underestimating our determination and our will to survive. Let them think they can crush us. They will soon learn the consequences of their miscalculation." The plan formulated was ambitious, an offensive to reclaim lost territory and disrupt the enemy's supply lines. Yossi's pulse quickened at the thought of the coming fight. This was a chance to not only defend their homeland, but also to shift the momentum of the war in their favor. He volunteered for the operation without hesitation, knowing that each soldier's heart was entwined with the fate of their nation. As dusk descended upon the landscape, casting a red hue over the horizon, Yossi and his unit prepared for the mission. They gathered in hushed camaraderie, exchanging tales of home and the dreams they longed to realize. Yossi felt a sense of unity wash over him, a reminder that they were not alone in this struggle. Together, they were part of something greater than themselves, a collective spirit fighting against the tides of history. When the moment finally arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Yossi and his comrades moved swiftly, infiltrating enemy territory under the cover of darkness. The sounds of the night enveloped them, the rustling of leaves and the distant murmur of the enemy camp ahead. As they advanced, Yossi's heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. This was a defining moment, a chance to alter the course of history. As the first shots rang out, chaos erupted. Yossi charged forward, adrenaline surging through his veins, his rifle steady in his hands. The clatter of gunfire filled the air, mingling with the shouts of soldiers and the cries of the wounded. In that moment, he was a part of something larger, a force of resilience surging against the tide of hate and violence. The battle raged, and the IDF fought valiantly to reclaim their territory. Yossi moved through the fray with an unwavering resolve, driven by the memories of those who had come before him. Each enemy soldier taken down was a step towards safeguarding their future, a promise made to those lost to the horrors of history. Hours passed, and as dawn broke, the tide began to turn. The enemy, unprepared for the ferocity of the Israeli assault, faltered. Yossi and his comrades pressed on, reclaiming lost ground fueled by determination and the hope of a brighter tomorrow. With each advance, the cries of victory surged through their ranks, echoing across the battlefield like a song of defiance. In the aftermath of the operation, Ben-Gurion addressed the nation, his voice carrying the weight of their shared struggle. "Today, we have shown that we will not be extinguished. Our resolve is unbreakable, and our spirit is indomitable. Together, we will build a future of hope and peace." The words resonated deeply within Yossi, a reminder that their sacrifices were not in vain. Meanwhile, General Schmidt, watching the events unfold from Berlin, felt an urge to take action. The weight of his past pressed upon him, and he could no longer remain a passive observer. He began reaching out to organizations dedicated to humanitarian aid, seeking ways to support the very people he had once wronged. It was a small step toward redemption, but every journey began with a single act of courage. As the months turned into years, the war raged on, but the resilience of Israel and its people became a beacon of hope against the darkness of history. The struggle for survival had transformed into a fight for identity, one that transcended the battlefield and echoed throughout the corridors of power across the globe. In the hearts of Yossi and his comrades, the flame of resilience continued to burn brightly. They had faced unspeakable horrors, yet they emerged stronger, united in purpose and unwavering in their determination to secure a future for their homeland. Each battle fought was a chapter in their story, and though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, they stood together, resolute in their fight for existence. As Yarsi gazed across the landscape, he envisioned the future where peace would reign, a world where the scars of history could heal and where the spirit of resilience would prevail. He understood that while the battles for borders would continue, the fight for hope and humanity would be the legacy they left behind, a testament to the power of resilience in the face of adversity. The echoes of war would forever shape their identity, but amid the shadows, the light of courage would guide them forward, leaving an indelible mark upon history.